As you awaken, you're going to, at some point, if you haven't already, need to be so clear about who you actually are that you are willing to make the tough choices, to say no to the people, the places, the opportunities, the things that are actually not in alignment with who you are. And there's something about the awakening journey that pulls this into view, in that if you are not cognizant of this, your life will not be yours. Your life will be out of alignment. And in this world, there's this tendency for us to, as pro-social beings, right? Pro-social means we help each other out. We are, I don't want to say completely altruistic, but we care, we care about our impact. Unfortunately, not everybody cares to the same degree, especially before the awakening process. But even before the awakening process, we are pro-social creatures. We live in communities. We live harmoniously with families, with nature. Well, here and there, of course. We decide what's a weed, what's a flower. We decide what's humane, what's not. And so there are complexities, right? But we want to be in harmonious living environments. Most of us do. And so this pro-social behavior can tend to stick us into situations where to give to another person, we might say yes, even though we want something different. And to some degree, in balance and reciprocity, this is normal and healthy and admirable. And in relationships, if you've been married a long time, you know that there's a lot of this, that sometimes somebody gets to pick the date night. Somebody else gets to pick the family vacation. Or there's just this merging of desires where you know that when you say yes, that at some point your partner is going to say yes to you too. In healthy, constructive relationships, it works like that. There's a give and a take, and it doesn't always have to be 50% all the time. There can be times that you're leaning on your partner and taking more, but you know that is temporary and that your partner has your back. And so this pro-social behavior, this mechanism, in this episode, I don't want to discourage you from throwing that out in its entirety. But I want you to understand, if you don't already, that the purpose of this alignment is actually to become so clear about who you are that you stop engaging in things that don't actually vibe or resonate with you. Because when we are talking about energetics, manifestation, and optimization of our lifelines, and even reality shifting, we have to understand how we truly feel about something. And misalignment is always a feeling. It can be a gut feeling, like a little ping in your stomach, like a little, not so sure about that. It can be disgust. It can be other vile-esque reactions, visceral, like, no, absolutely not. And when you understand your resonant frequency, and when something is actually aligned with you, that has a different type of a feeling, like a vroom, vroom. Perhaps you meet somebody and they're like a soul fam. And you meet them and you're talking to them and you feel so energized. You feel lifted up. You feel seen. You feel whatever, insert adjective, right? And then all of a sudden it's like vroom, vroom, in your heart, in your solar plexus. If you're awake to to that level of information that your body is able to receive. Not everybody listening is going to be awake to that, and that's okay. That's why we call it a practice, because you awaken more and more levels of information. And resonance, frequency, and vibration, if you're in any sort of metaphysical circles, you are firmly enmeshed in, right? You hear about this all the time. You need to be in the vibration to meet your reality. You actually need to match the vibration to have that opportunity, to have that lifestyle, to have that person, right? What this means is that you have to become a match for whatever you are trying to bring in. Either manifest, either shift. You actually have to energetically, within a similar order. It doesn't have to be exact, but it has to be close enough to where there is a reciprocal ring, ring. So both of you, or the opportunity in you, or the reality in you, creates this harmonics. Ring, ring, ring. And that creates a vortex that stabilizes the field, that allows you to anchor into that opportunity. Meaning it doesn't just pass through your fingertips, or like a failure to launch situation, or a manifestation of a new partner. But after like month 1, they're like, I think we should just be friends. Yeah. You want to be able to hold the vibration. How do you do that? You have to be relentless in saying no to what you're not and who you're not. You actually have to say no. And when we come from any sort of codependent, toxic love bonds, what can happen is that we are frightened of doing exactly that. We are frightened of pissing somebody off, of triggering somebody. Good God, how many of us at some point are deeply terrified of triggering somebody, especially when they have any sort of influence or power over our life or our destiny. It becomes a thing. Sycophants exist for a reason. Yes, men and women and them exist for a reason, because some of those egos, you hit that tripwire and your whole life is turned upside down, all for you just speaking the truth. You could have literally said, hey, Emperor doesn't have any clothes. Next thing you know, you're like blacklisted. Why is that? That's because lower order sentience doesn't like the vibration of truth, unless it serves them in some significant way. And then you have to understand timing and the other implications of speaking truth where it's not entirely welcomed, except for that random Blue Moon Tuesday. And so when you are in circles like that, you might walk on eggshells. You might feel as though there's a hierarchy that can't be questioned. And you would be right. And when you understand deep down inside who you actually are versus what you want to create and manifest in this world, then you understand how to say no and to speak the truth anyway. If that's your truth. Some of you actually have to go through different ladders and opportunities or organizations because it teaches you something fundamental that you can't get anywhere else. And so some of you may have this feeling internally like you are misaligned, but that you're exactly where you need to be, and you would be correct. So trust that feeling. Nobody else is going to know it except for you. And it's just going to be this strange inclination, like you see the writing on the wall, you know how things are, but you need to be there anyway. And take it on the chin. For others, though, who have a little more mobility and their soul is calling them in a different direction, when you are afraid of triggering somebody or saying no, especially when you are in relationships where there's an exchange, where maybe you're not getting exactly what you want, but you're getting some things that you want. And so you're willing to settle or say yes sometimes, because what's the harm in saying yes sometimes, even though you don't really feel like it? What's the harm? Just going out to dinner. There may not be a harm necessarily, but if you're not careful, there's an opportunity cost. And energy doesn't lie. And the thing about opportunity cost is that you might not see it, you might not know it until way, 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 way in the future and you're looking back. But every time you say yes when you really mean no, or every time you say yes when you really mean like, I don't know, what you're doing is you are prioritizing those experiences. When you learn how to protect your energy, you learn how to actually not have to have a valid reason or a socially acceptable excuse. If you're still in the I need to give an excuse, you're probably not there yet when it comes to aligning yourself. Because if you can't say in your relationships, I want to stay in because I really don't feel like going out tonight, or I want to stay in because I'm not actually interested in you in that way, and I don't want to mislead you. When you start speaking the truth, the actual truth, instead of, so-and-so called and they're having a really hard time, so I'm gonna take care of them. Yeah, there's been, a problem at work and I just can't get out of it. Yeah. And so if you're still lying, you're not aligned. That's my personal opinion. And there's no judgment. Everybody goes through this. It's actually really common because we live in this society where ghosting and not being fully forthright with people is socially acceptable, almost as though we've all collectively become avoidant, even though we haven't. I teach about avoidant attachment style on my other channels. Next Level by Dr. C. Doctor is all spelled out DOCTOR, as in cat, Dr. C. Next Level by Dr. C. So it's like we've collectively become avoidantly attached, right? And instead of actually dealing with the truth head on and saying, you know what, that was a fun time, but actually I'm not that interested. I know it was fun, but I'm just not feeling the level of resonance that I actually need to want to have a third date, or, to want to sleep with you again. It kind of felt like you were somewhere else, maybe disassociating, give them feedback. Why not? They're probably going their entire life not understanding that, yes, they're present, like their physical body is moving, but it feels like they're checked out somewhere else. And that might change their life. And if the answer is no for you, if your body is rejecting them, then how many more times do you need? Do you need a pregnancy to figure that out? It's a serious question. Because when we are misaligned and we are saying yes, sorry, somebody needed that. I don't know who needs it. If it's you, you can just feel it, resonate with it, and Let it really, really guide you home. Because when we say yes, when we actually mean no, we're continuing to go down a corridor of a co-creation with somebody. And then when we're not reading the signs on the wall, the signs on the wall are like, exit, quick, turn back before it goes into nightmare land, before it goes into stagnation land. There are signs everywhere, right? But we're like, it's probably fine. I know I'm probably just making too big of a deal of that thing, and your body is telling you viscerally, no, not another one, no. But we're like, they seem really nice. I know, I know. It's a little weird the way that they talk about their exes. That's a little strange. It's a little weird that they seem a little checked out. It's a little weird that, they fill in the blank. And so you progress down this hallway, this corridor with them. And the more you progress, the harder it is to just turn around. You remember that first date, right? Where you had so much mobility to just be like, no, that's fine. Well, sometimes relationships with people, particularly if they have any sort of toxic patterns, or if they're not awake or not evolved, or any sort of narcissism, or worse, and what can happen is that they can latch on to the idea of you as an ownership, property, prize. And the further you go with them, the less likely it is that you're going to be able to extract yourself without some major, major problems. Do you really need to go through the lifeline of getting a restraining order? Do you really need to go all the way to the end of that lifeline to feel the pain of devastation or loss or disruption? Because if you had said no earlier, right, then you wouldn't have to see some of those basements, some of those corridors. If your life is like a maze, and every decision that you're making, left, right, or straight, turn around, at any point on the maze, you're meeting people, you're meeting jobs, you're meeting opportunities. Well, this is sending you into, let's say, the quadrants of a maze in, the northeast direction. And the next 20 years, you are in that northeast quadrant. And you're meeting other people, you have other opportunities which spawn off other opportunities. It's like a web, right? And so when you understand how the web of manifestation of your lifelines are literally creating a maze that you're following, when you are deciding things not from resonance or frequency or alignment, then you are more apt to get lost, or to be in a part of the maze that you wouldn't wish on anybody. We call this karmic loops, karmic cycles, because you're stuck there in that part until you break free. Sometimes all you have to do, is literally just say no. Especially when you mean it. And that can look like a multitude of things depending on your situation. It can look like turning down the job. It can look like turning down the proposal, the marriage proposal. Turning down, the opportunity to move abroad because something doesn't sit right with you. These are major, major life decisions that when you're actually understanding who you are on the inside as an awakening being, and you're feeling into the energy. By the way, just as a side note, if you are ever wondering how to decide whether or not to move in a particular location, one thing that I like to do is I like to use my body and the energy of the places on a little piece of paper or cards, and you can just write them on like a Post-it note, or you can take a piece of paper and you can cut it up and just write the locations down there. Shuffle them up. And if you have clairsentience in your hand, you can do this by just placing your hand with your eyes closed in a semi-meditative state. If you can drop in quickly, if you can't, this is going to be a little more challenging. But if you can drop in quickly, then you stand up, shuffle the pieces on a counter, make sure that they are turned down, and you place your hand over the general area of the counter, and you feel any sort of vibrations or frequency. You feel any sensations, and it might come differently for you than it does for me, so I'm not going to describe it. But if you are attuned to energy, you will feel something, and you will feel something different about some pieces of paper or cards than others. And you pull those off to a side, right? And some of them you might not even feel. Let's say you have 5 options. Maybe 2 of them you get like a little energy buzz. One of them you get like a pit in your stomach. And the others, there's no feeling at all. You don't even know that they exist. You work with the 3 and you understand what the energy is telling you. The pit in your stomach, obviously, maybe you don't want to go there. And the others, you might want to meditate on. There are other ways that you can do this too. But when you utilize the frequency of a plan, I've also done this just laying down in meditation and imagining myself in that location and then feeling whatever thoughts, feelings, and sensations I have in my chakra system. To get insight, it's almost like porting your consciousness. I talk about this more in my EC by Dr. C. The link is in the description if you're interested in that. Quantum shifting, esoteric topics. And it's a mentoring monthly membership. You also get quantum meditations delivered to your inbox. You can check the link if it calls to you. But when you port your consciousness into other timelines and you receive the feedback, you can actually feel the likelihood of how something is going to manifest for you. And so if you're uncertain about a person or a decision, I love doing this, by the way, you can tap in at any time. You can tap in and feel the energy that they're trying to co-create with you with. It's very telling and very revealing. And you get a lot of information that you have to learn how to sort out. And this is why intuition, in my opinion, is a prerequisite. Because if you can't even trust yourself to intuitively read somebody or a situation, then, or you don't trust the signals in your body, then you're really going to struggle with these esoteric energy practices. You really are. You need to be able to have the subtle sense of intuition, emotion, which is going to set you up to be able to sense vibration and frequency. And so if you're somebody who has trouble untangling powerful emotions, then you might have trouble with the subtle feelings of energy, which means, practically speaking, that you might have to traverse down some of these really long corridors to see some bitter endings because you're not yet in tune with what your consciousness, your soul, however you want to frame it. Not everybody here listening is going to be spiritual, but there is another part of your being that can sense this level of information, but you have to be awake to it. If you're not awake to it, then of course, you're going to be living in a reality construct that is very much confined to your 5 senses. And you're going to listen to this, and it's going to feel very foreign to you, but that's okay. It doesn't mean that it's always going to be foreign. It just means that if you're in a marathon race, you're at the earlier part of the race. It doesn't mean you're not going to get there. It just means that You have more to run before you're going to be able to deeply understand this. So for you, I recommend starting with intuition and making sure you can name all of your emotions. You don't have to regulate them all yet, but you need to be able to name them, meaning put emotion words to them other than good and bad. How are you feeling? Oh, I'm good. No, that's not an emotion. How are you feeling? Happy, sad. Those are the basic emotions. That's good. That's a start. But you need to get down even further. How are you feeling? I'm feeling a little perplexed, actually, because I'm triggered by something that you said. And I know that this is my wounding pattern. I know you probably didn't intend on it. But when I heard that, I definitely felt a pang of sadness and a tinge of rage, because it seemed like you were questioning me, questioning my fill in the blank. When you can communicate your inner world like that in degrees and complexities, meaning you have multiple emotions, they're not just happy and sad or good and bad, but there are degrees. People, by the way, with insecure attachment styles like avoidant attachment styles struggle with this, and fearful avoidance do too. You struggle with being able to understand the emotions inside because you've developed shortcuts to cut them off, to distract yourself, to numb yourself, to dissolve any attachment to them by subverting your attention to addictions, things of that nature. So you're going to need to first work on your attachment style. You're welcome to check out my TikTok channel or Instagram. I teach a lot about it because a lot of people struggle with it. And when we're working with the mind and the wounds and the patterns in the mind are such a big contributor to what we see in our manifested worlds, particularly the painful circumstances, that when we untangle what's in the mind, it's liberating. But that's just like the first stop, right? That's the fundamentals. Then we got to open your heart, right? Because most people coming from that background are afraid. They're afraid to love. They're afraid to feel. They don't know how to love that intensely. And so they end up not. And as a result, they live a life that's very disconnected. And they don't feel very challenged and very triggered because they've cut off a big part of themselves. And when you start to work through these patterns, you're going to find yourself to be more sensitive because you are connecting more with your authentic being inside. And some of you, this has been suppressed or repressed for so long that it kind of scares you, because there's like an intensity inside that wants to be witnessed, that wants to be heard, but you might not have the partners around you who can actually hold space for you. Okay. And they might not. That might be an actual judgment. So that's real. You need to find community. You need to find support. You need to hire a coach. You need to work with somebody. AI is a great start, but eventually you're going to need to work with a human to actually connect you fully and open you up fully. And then you're going to be well on your way to being able to advance in the esoteric energy practices. You can do energy work before all of that. And my personal opinion is I don't advise it, but you can. But it's messy, as you can imagine, right? And you can have misfires, and you can misdirect things, and you can start throwing psychic attacks, and because you feel like somebody is hurting you, and all it is a projection of your mind because you haven't really worked through the projections of your mind. I've been there. We've all at certain points have been there. Of course, not everybody shares the same story, but you have to understand that your alignment comes from complete authenticity. And when you are awakening at that level of authenticity, what's going to happen is that your sensitivity and your intensity is going to come online, perhaps faster than you're prepared for. And this opens up beautiful abilities that you can harness, like energy sensing and other gifts and other abilities. And utilizing that in your manifestations is absolutely critical. Absolutely critical, in my personal opinion. Can you manifest without that? Yes, many people do. But to really bring yourself in to the higher order frequency, matching your frequency, how the hell are you going to do that if you can't feel your own frequency? How are you going to match your frequency with your manifestation if you can't even feel your own vibration, your own life force energy? Are you going to imagine what love feels like when your heart is closed, your heart chakra is closed? Or is the love that you're imagining the karmic love, the 3D love that you've always ever known? You don't even necessarily know about the other octaves of love because you haven't ever opened up yourself to feel that. But your mind wants it. What does it want? Exactly. So when we start to unpack this, you start to realize that if you're still lying and giving excuses about why you can't be present to people, you're probably not as aligned as you think you are. You're probably not as authentic as you need to be in order to advance in these esoteric practices. Because when we are aligning ourselves with truth, with conviction, with our voice, what we're doing is we're not entertaining people that we don't actually want to entertain. And what does that mean practically? It means we're not giving them the illusion that we are entertaining them. We're not giving them the illusion, because everything is a co-creation. And you don't want people co-creating a relationship with you if you literally have no intention of having one with them. You don't want that energy in your field. You don't want them calling you all the time expecting that it's going to progress to a place that you literally never intend on going. A, it's not ethical to them, but B, energetically, it clogs up your field. And let's say you're trying to manifest an actual love interest. Anybody who's attuned, right? I'm not talking about somebody who is not awake yet. Anybody who is awakening and attuned or awake, they're going to feel those attachments in your field. They're going to feel that person at work that is hanging on to a thread of an idea. They're going to feel any sort of vibration that you guys have. And so we're going to talk more about this because it's really important. Once we get into the energy dynamics, what you think is private is not as private anymore if you haven't already figured that out. Some of you already have. It's kind of fun, isn't it? You walk into a room and you just know things, and you look around and other people who are awake know things too. And it's like your eyes are open. Even though the conversation may be at the superficial level, it's like the subtext is being read by multiple people. That's the beauty of awakening. If you know, you know. We will keep talking about this, but understanding your alignment at this level is critical, and understanding what you're saying yes to and why, and what you're still being polite about and why. Sometimes it's necessary, but you need to know your why. You need to be clear about that and what you're saying no to and why. And when you have those mapped out, you're going to be in a good position for having the clarity that you need to deeply understand the authentic being inside and how you're creating and who and what you're resonating with, which is going to set you up for our future conversations. We'll talk next time. I'm Dr. C.